think nuclear now is a debate this country has to have, and I think we've got to find a way of getting there.
I didn't realise that your grandfather was the boss of the Snowy River, like an engineer himself. Was that right?
Yeah, he was
a family law.
Yeah. So he's a civil engineer.
Yeah,
fought in the First World War. Was badly wounded at the Ballabully Court, and then went on to being a civil engineer, working in dams in Scotland, New Zealand, and then ultimately in Australia. He was a South Island New Zealander.
Right. Fabulous.
And
my maternal grandparents are Kiwis as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, look. So basically, he was in charge of the most important energy and infrastructure project of the 20th century in Australia. Would he be proud of the coalition's record on energy and infrastructure between 2013 and 2022?
I've never said this to anyone, but I tell you what he would be proudest of all is that we're going down the nuclear path. So he had a vision way back in the 50s that what you needed was a combination of what Snowy could provide, which was on-demand power at times when it was really needed, not 24 hours a day, but when it was really needed. You could combine that with baseload atomic energy, as they called it back in those days. And that was his view about where the energy system needed to go over time. It was a widely held view, by the way.
You read the science fiction of the 50s and everything set in the 21st century is entirely powered by nuclear. But hasn't technology around renewables made that largely a fiction of the past?
Well, I don't think so, because you still need baseload power, and renewables, whilst they can play a role in your system, and particularly, say, household solar can keep your lights on during the day and into the evening, particularly if you stick a battery on them, they can play a role. But that baseload power that's critical for manufacturing, for data centres increasingly, I think it's much harder for renewables to play that role. And it was that mix that he saw way back when. In fact, when I was Energy Minister, I dug out articles from speeches he'd made back in the 50s and 60s where he talked about exactly this. That's where the system needed to go over time. So I think he'd be pleased that we're going in that direction.
Was this something you were flagging as Energy Minister? Were there conversations about it back then, or is this something that's happened in this term of government?
Well, obviously the big move we made when we were in government was on AUKUS. And so that was a big move.
Yeah, but that's not an energy move.
Well, except that it was nuclear. And we have to remember, at that time, the notion of nuclear even being part of this country beyond Lucas Heights.
Powering a military submarine is different from powering a town.
Well, it's much less different these days than it used to be. I mean, that's what small modular reactors are. They're the same thing. That's what a nuclear submarine is powered by a small modular reactor.
Yeah.
And so increasingly we're seeing convergence between
I get it, but I'm just interested in the genesis of where the nuclear thing comes. I mean, I've said many times, I admire the courage that it takes for a party to actually, decide on something that isn't necessarily hugely popular and say we're going to have the faith in it to be able to sell it to the Australian people. At the same time, it feels a bit random to some people. Some people are like, well, hang on, where did this come from? They were in power for quite a long time. You were the energy minister. Where was it back then?
Well, I mean, as I say, you got to take people on a journey. And I think an important part of that journey was AUKUS, accepting nuclear submarines on our coastlines, in our ports, on a regular basis as part of our energy, our defence system. I think that had to happen. I think that was a prerequisite. Whether that would ultimately lead to us going forward with a nuclear policy, we didn't know at the time. That wasn't a decision.
But you could have a nuclear policy without AUKUS, and you could have AUKUS without a nuclear policy.
But I think it was a natural progression.
Right. Okay.
And as I say, it wasn't an orchestrated plan, but it certainly has turned out that I think that was the journey Australians needed to go on.
So it's not something that you were pushing for as Energy Minister?
No, it was something that I thought was a technology that needed over time to be part of the mix, but when that might happen, whether it was even going to be in my lifetime was not clear to me.
Right.
And it certainly wasn't part of the plan. But I think it was a natural progression in the end from where we were when we were in government. I mean, these things are journeys, and I think our energy system has not always been a happy journey in recent years. But I think nuclear now is a debate this country has to have, and I think we've got to find a way of getting there.
When you were an advisor on infrastructure in the private sector, I wonder if you learnt anything then that you bring into the public sector.
Well, I learned a lot. I mean, I was an advisor on more than infrastructure.
Yeah.
I advised the biggest industry in New Zealand, the dairy industry there, for many years, and that was a really exciting time to be in what was the fastest growing and biggest industry in New Zealand, and soon after worked in the iron ore sector here in Australia. Again, the biggest, fastest growing sector in Australia in that particular case, as well as working on infrastructure projects. And yeah, I think I learned a lot. I think I learned about what it takes to grow an industry, which is also, when it's a critical industry for a country, what it takes to grow a country, what it takes to create prosperity, what it takes to create great jobs and opportunities for people. And I think those industries have done that for this nation. I've also learned that in places like Australia and New Zealand, those industries are often looked down on. People like to look down on the mining industry and agriculture. Some of the smartest, best people I've ever worked with are in those industries, and they do unbelievable work. We should be incredibly proud that we've built economies on the back of those industries. The smarts in them, the technology in them is absolutely world-leading, and what we've achieved in those industries is something I think we should be
Where
very,
do you
very
detect the lack of pride or the looking down?
Oh, there's a lot of
What is
people
that?
who will say, agriculture is an industry of the past for Australia. Mining is an industry we should move on from. I mean, I think that the left...
Well, mining, there may be a climate component to that, or a dirty,
Sure.
Extractive industry. But I don't think. I suppose in the kind of let's make Australia a smart country in the 21st century, there could be criticism of agriculture as a lowbrow, easy, low-hanging fruit industry rather than...
Oh, no, there's a study that comes out on a regular basis about complexity in industry and how Australia is not complex enough because it's got too much of a focus on agriculture and mining, and a number of the media channels, every time that comes out, they run it and say, gee, we're not complex enough. Why aren't we outside of these industries? I mean, I think that's nuts. I mean, these are amazing industries with amazing people, and they've been a backbone of the country. I think there's also a green left attack going on those industries, which you mentioned, including agriculture. I mean, I see that in agriculture regularly, and we're seeing that now with a push to force through the banks very detailed emissions disclosures from farmers. I mean, how's a farmer going to count the methane coming from a cow? I mean, this stuff is nuts. But that's the push that's going on at the moment.
I see.
And I think there's a sense that nice, clean, white-collar industries are what we should be focused on. I mean, they're an important part of what we do in this country, but we should celebrate these resource and primary industries as well.
Yeah, right.